but if nobody minds if I get us started. I happen to know that there are a couple of proposals, but the first thing I really hope we could do is just go around and people would introduce themselves, because we have...
This coming Wednesday, there's going to be an event about strike death that's happening at Salem State College. It's happening through Rich's curriculum there. And, but I made some T-shirts last night with Noah McKenna, who has a screen printing
Excellent.
thing.
Oh, cool.
Oh, let's see. Rich.
Not saying have to pass, I'm passing the T-shirt.
Dave Newton met with the folks from the United for a Fair Economy, bring that project to completion.
Any more announcements?
All right, listen, we have postponed the meetings, General Assembly meetings, from every week to every 2 weeks. So we're going to change the schedule. I suggest that the next meeting will be next Sunday, this coming Sunday.
19th instead. 7 o'clock on the 19th in GA. Okay, so we got
Right.
one proposal done.
I would like to propose that the cots that we have in storage should be donated to the Harvard Homeless Shelter. I have talked to Bobby, who has spent time in the Harvard Homeless Shelter, and she knows that they need them. I believe we have approximately 12 cots, which I do not think have ever been used. In any case, they haven't been used since they've been sitting in the storage shelter for the past year, so I would like to propose that we donate them.
Is there anyone who wants to take it out of the consent bucket, or can we just consider it passed? Passed.
I would like to have more information about his proposal.
Sorry?
I would like to have more information about his proposal, maybe another General Assembly meeting. Because when I go on the website,
It's on the
I don't
website.
know, there is no transparency of what the money is going, and where the money is.
The previous meeting, as I understand, we did not make a decision about what would happen to the kitchen tent. And so the other proposal is to authorize the kitchen tent to be stored by one of our members by the name of John Ford, who has worked with it before, and arrange for it to get to places where it can be used by other groups.
I want that to come out of the consent bucket.
Okay? Done.
I apologize. We're at the point that we intended to be for this meeting, which was to have a discussion of what we've accomplished. So would someone else like to take over facilitating for a little while, Larry?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Rich, when we compare what we've got now to what we had back then, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that we're just another fringe element on the political scene. At least to a certain degree, events made us. You know, things, we all came together because enough people were excited by the idea that people are actually getting out on the streets and saying, you know, things are really screwed up. They're screwed up for the wrong reasons. Change needs to take place now. People know about us. People are excited by what we're doing. I remember some of the people at Occupy the Tees told me of the kind of the reception they got when they on the trains was very enthusiastic.
The genesis of the movement, in my view, happened after the Wall Street bailout, which was a demonstration, a very public example of how uncontrolled greed could actually break the financial system. It could be stretched to fill the coffers of the already wealthy so far that it could actually break the system. And on the verge of breaking it required like trillions of dollars to sort of restore it, all of which went to the very people who wrecked the system because of their greed. None of which went to the people who lost their pensions, their homes, etc. So that spawned a movement. But it's not clear what the movement was about. So for some people, it was about anti-capitalism. For some people, it was about, well, it was about many different things. But to me, the salient thing that it was about was an acknowledgement that the supposed political spectrum that went from left to right, that was supposed to be represented by two parties that were Democrat and Republican, was not a sufficient spectrum to talk about how we were going to heal that system, because the Democrats and Republicans colluded in that machination. I mean, the thing that we could agree upon was a tactic, which was to make a public display of discontent with that option, the set of options that were currently available, that were represented by the camps. When the camps were destroyed by the same political structure that was invested in that supposed political spectrum, then suddenly we didn't have a thing that the movement was. It was a strategy, but it didn't have an agreed upon agenda. So for some people, the agenda was to get the Democrats to be more progressive. Other people, their agenda was to have a third party that was outside of Republicans and Democrats. Other people's agenda was
ignore them.
anti-capitalism in general, or international solidarity. People had all those different agendas. So then to say, what have we done to sustain the Occupy Wall Street movement? It's not clear what the movement was about.
What struck me about the movement was, quite frankly, a deep politicization, because once we had the wake-up call about the 2008 meltdown, with this collusion, as you said, not just between the continuity of power, politics can come and go, get a Democratic president or a Republican president, but when we discovered that the banks, private sector banks, and the Ponzi schemes with regard to the mortgage crisis, and then the bailout by the Federal Reserve in collusion with the Treasury, based on actors who actually were going against their own ideologies.
Jerry, next.
A couple of things. I think what was initially apparent that made this a movement, not an organization per se, was the blatancy of the economic equality and the inequality, and the role of government and private sector and all of that. Stock market hit its all-time record high, and unemployment is still 8%, which is saying, guess who's recovered and guess who hasn't. There are two very different worlds here, and that's not going to change, and that's just going blasé blah. On the other hand, in the Globe today, there was a story about Occupy going to the SEC to enforce some of those regulations, which is a particular part of Occupy.
Joe?
Well, I think the excitement that was generated at first had so much to do with people thinking that it somehow coincided with a new technology and new social media and all that stuff. It looks like, gee, what a shrinkage has happened. But a lot of the connections that have been built up in other cities are still around, and what impresses me always is that there are types of organizations that are so very loose, but they still sort of work. We're not visible enough anymore. And I think that one of the ways that I was encouraged by Occupy was that it had some potential to not be another in the long list of progressive organizations that has a nice little group of idealists behind them and does not actually get taken very seriously, and that there would be a mass base at some point.
We have hung on to do a lot of interesting projects. We have campaigns going. There's we've been unbelievably active and busy. What we haven't had is coverage for what we've done. And there were a lot of people who were involved at that point who had no longer term vision. And they stopped because the action slowed down. And I actually think we got to give ourselves some credit for hanging on and creating a lot of events, movements, activities, presence.
The thing that really impressed me about the camp was the way throughout 2 months we could have these relatively huge marches almost on a daily basis that attracted, and a lot of this had to do with the media, the fact that they were actually, partially because they wanted to make fun of us, probably predominantly because they wanted to make fun of us, but people were really interested in what we were doing, people were starting to join us, and also I was in the info tent, and particularly during the month of November, after a couple of weeks of this, people I never would have thought, and that it was unimaginable to me that they'd have any interest in us. They were coming to us, and the thing is, because we lost the camp, those two connections have been severed. We don't have the possibility to generate these big marches spontaneously, and we don't have the connection, partially because we lost the first we don't have the connection with the passerby, with just the average person.
When people were feeling really excited because they felt like they were part of a revolutionary movement, they invited Noam Chomsky to come and talk about that, and people were expecting him to say, all right, we're having a revolution now. And he was much more sanguine about the whole thing. He said, the most important thing is that you've met each other. And he said, if you continue to keep the affection and commitment and the bonds that you have formed here, and you sustain that, then it's possible to create a movement that can change things. And I think that in terms of our accomplishment, I think that's kind of the most important thing that we did, was that we met each other, and we're continuing to meet new people. So the example that I'm talking about is when Occupy Sandy happened, when a catastrophe happened in New York City, and FEMA was not equal to the task of dealing with the catastrophe. They were publicly failing. The network of associations of people who were Occupy Wall Street, which had disbanded and broken down, basically, but that network of associations was put into action and was clearly still there.
I don't think they talk about Occupy, about 350.org in Hong Kong, which is all much greater as they are.
I was hearing about him talking about future plans. Now, how about the next move, which is the legal lawyers saying that they're having a ball on March 15, fundraiser. It's a ball, right? Like a event. Can I get a free ticket to go? I mean, I don't have $25.
Yep. So for me, Occupy was all about the idea that the system is broken, let's fix it. And then all of the examples, all of the unfairness, all of the Monsanto examples, all of the tar sands examples, all of the climate change examples, all of the racist examples, all of the sexist examples, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, are merely examples of the fundamental concept which brought me to Occupy, which is a concept that the system is broken, let's fix it. What we have done is made connections, and I've been able to go down to New York several times, and to the Republican National Convention, and to the National Gathering in Philadelphia, and to the debates up in New Hampshire, and now Portland and 350.org I've become involved with. So all of these things have made me a far more effective and far more involved activist, I guess that's a fair term. Is that pretty much everybody looks at the system and everybody says, oh my God, the system is totally screwed, it is so unfair. And I want the Republicans, the real right-wing Republicans who say, I am a free market capitalist, rah, rah, rah. I want them to say, well, let's make the rich people pay their taxes. Let's make sure that all of those bums on welfare have an opportunity to work. You know, I agree with the unions. I want the right to work, meaning that every single citizen of this country has a right to a job to pay them enough to live on. And if we put our tax money there, and then we don't need welfare. Most people don't want welfare, they want to work. And so all of these things Occupy has enormously contributed to, in my humble opinion.
It's excellent about everybody in the same room to start that conversation, but the problem is we haven't learned how to get together yet and work together. Everybody came to the table, not everybody, a lot of people seem to come to the table expecting the answers to already be there. They didn't really know how to work together to get the work done. And there were a lot of, the anarchists would push away some of the other people, and some of the other people would push away the anarchists, and it just got to a point where the people that were there were so fundamental that it was kind of alienating anybody else. That it was kind of trying to find a good middle ground. There are a couple 2 weeks, the homeless population came in, and a lot of people were really receptive to it. It was great. They're like, of course, why would they not come here? There's 3 meals. These people are on the streets facing the hardships that are the cause of all these problems that we're looking at. And then there were this whole other group of people that were like, no, we can't be a welfare camp. And it's like, that's, I don't know, that itself honestly destroyed the camp. And the Occupy I was involved with was actually one of the first, it seems, to actually disband the camp through the democratic process, deciding that their energy could be best used organizing actions and not maintaining a camp.
I was very unhappy about the bank bailouts, and I thought they were extremely unfair. And wow, there's this whole group of people that seem to be, you know, they're camping out in the park in protest of this. I thought that was terribly exciting. And you know, it wasn't until October of 2011 that I marched in the street. I took part in my first protest march and, you know, found out how empowering that, you know, could feel. One of the thing that's kept me involved, more than anything else over the last, you know, however many months it's been, has been what I've learned from other people and the different perspectives that I've gotten from other people. You know, I've read some books about, you know, different movements, and the one organizing strategy that, you know, I think that I'm capable of actually pulling off is something Cesar Chavez used to do. I talk to someone, and then I talk to someone else, and then I talk to someone else. And it's like Bill was saying, you just keep talking to people who, you know, who aren't us. But I guess for me it's really been, you know, exposure to different ideas and different viewpoints.
The homeless population being there, it was challenging, but it taught us. It taught us a lot. It taught us that there's an underbelly of society that's even like layers and layers and layers of society. A lot of these kids, I'm sorry if I come off saying this wrong, if I do, but a lot of these college kids, myself.
I think a lot of what we learned was how to be better organized as far as prioritizing what needs to be done as far as which issues we should tackle first of the many. You know, I think we tried, case in point what Bobby was just saying, I mean, the police literally sent homeless people into the camps and they raised hell constantly. And again, I agree, it was 80% of the time after maybe about a month was spent dealing with these stupid fights that everybody was having, and we had stuff to get done. However, on the other hand, I think that their presence there did serve as an example of what can happen when, you know, the tides return and people don't have jobs, and, you know, you become more and more like rats in a cage, which was what the camp turned into for me anyway.
Well, we had our 15 minutes of fame, and we accomplished a lot. We made people stand up and notice. If people get organized, what we can do. We made Homeland Security pay attention. It was a coordinated effort, and I think to squash us, but they really haven't got rid of us. They just slowed our momentum, and I think we should all get together with different cities and start over again, kind of like a rebirth, second wind.
One of the things that's really important to me is that we see what we have as worth keeping going, and I see us as waiting to catch a wave. And to the best of my memory, while we had the camp, we did not have sustained, organized campaigns. I think one thing we can do is do things that aren't just a one-shot something, even though I've liked a lot of the one-shot events that we've done many different, when I went back and looked, I couldn't believe how many small actions and things like that we'd actually participated in and been part of. But I think that we can try to take on larger things where we work together and build to something more powerful in the way that Strike Dead in New York has and that we're hoping to do here. So my real hope is that we'll do that. And I wanted to mention, just in the spirit of something which seems to me somewhat serendipity, that one big thing we accomplished, which did get a lot of publicity post-camp, was Bill's taking on the
Pax Centurion.
Pax Centurion. It was something that other occupiers picked up on, and that we did something kind of exciting about based on just a random initiative of Bill's.
So I'm from Detroit, and my parents were union organizers, so they were always involved in organizing and protest action. But for the most part, there was a mandate that we didn't march. You know, we organized and we did more actions and educated people and you know, just had collectives and whatnot. So I'm trying to. So they were involved in the shutting down the Dodge plant because the unions were segregated and weren't allowing, you know, black auto workers union representation. For example, the situation in India right now, where women who would never come out in public and protest and fight and start saying, you know what, I'm carrying a gun now, I'm carrying a knife, you attack me, I'm going to start taking martial arts, whatever. There's a continuum where people are saying, I'm going to stand up for myself. You know, that to me is the accomplishment, to see that it carries forward. And
was the fact that there was a sign with a minuscule number of people that said Occupy immediately was perceived as such a threat that they called in like 2 cars and 4 cops. You know, and that in itself is an accomplishment in terms of how this was perceived as a potential threat, even if you didn't always live up to the potential threat that we hoped we would be. The other thing that I think is an accomplishment, but less of one than we thought, was like the MBTA stuff. We had hoped that we were going to have thousands of people in the Capitol. We had 600. 600 ain't bad, but it wasn't Wisconsin. And we were not the sole force, but we played a significant role in that did force them to accept a less draconian, you know, solution to the T.
Okay, and that there's a certain mystique about us, and that makes it possible for it sort of gets us attention. It would sure as hell be a great time for OMBTA to make a reappearance, and the idea of free fare Fridays, massive fare strike, or something like that, and actually follow through on it. And they certainly talked through all the options and the possibilities.
Back when the camps were still happening, there was an open letter that came from a group of people who had been occupying the in Tahrir Square. So this is just one paragraph in that letter. They said, "Our only real advice to you is to continue, keep going, and do not stop. Occupy more, find each other, build larger and larger networks, and keep discovering new ways to experiment with social life, consensus, and democracy. Discover new ways to use spaces, discover new ways to hold on to them and never give them up again. Resist fiercely when under attack, but otherwise take pleasure in what you are doing. Let it be easy, fun even. We are all watching one another now."
Yes.
And from Cairo, we want to say that we are in solidarity with you and we love you all for what you are doing.
Yes, absolutely. So we didn't know we could do this. We didn't know we could go storm the CEO headquarters and yell at them, but we like it. You know, talk about accomplishments. I thought if I brought my calendar for the last 2 years, the number of different things that each of us did, we would have huge lists of things that did get accomplished that made us feel really great at the time. But as you know, my specialty is chanting. So as long as I can chant. One, we are the people. Two, we are united. Three, that this occupation is not leaving, etc.
Because in these societies, they face torture, they face government repression, disappearance, rape, by the people that are supposed to protect them. We at least have some basic political and civil liberties that we take for granted, and therefore we can focus on corruption and institutional inequality and all the issues that plague us. But these individuals, they've overcome their fear factors. Why? Why now, as opposed to maybe 10 years ago or 5 years from now? And if we can rediscover the sources of how we can overcome our fear factors for the American citizenry, that could ignite more people to come out and really put their own identities out there, like we're doing today. And we can draw inspiration from those international actors. There's some kind of commiseration.
And I may have said this to some of the people, but so I teach political science, and I have seen just a change in attitudes, totally anecdotally, in my students from the time Occupy started until now. The number of people who see the U.S. as a class or elite-based system rather than an egalitarian system has just totally flipped. It used to be 20% saw, you know, class or elite, and 80% saw this charming little place. And in the 3 semesters since then, very small sample, maybe a total of 100 people, it's now 80% who see it as elite or class.
And nothing you
And
said
20% see it as, you know, a nice little democratic place.
Right.
Oh, okay. Now we really are fitting the hippie stereotype, aren't we? There's children on the corner handing out some pretty flyers. We work so hard to make to tell the people about the fires. The banks that set them ask us that we need to put them out. But we're sick of all this fighting, so we're gonna scream and shout. They take away our train and they take away our freedom. They think they can hide, they think that we don't see them. But me and all my friends will stand here sleeping night and day to make sure the pain in the world just goes away. Me and all my friends, we're on the steps, we're on the steps. 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 Where's the revolution? On the steps. On the steps. Where will there be change? On the steps. On the steps.
Woohoo!